Hey gang, welcome to Freedom Fastlane. I'm Ryan Daniel Moran. And if you will, for a second, I want you to imagine that you have cancer. And on top of that, you don't just have cancer, you are also homeless. And beyond being homeless, you're obviously broke. And more than that, you're also a drug user. And if you can imagine that, then you might have a glimpse into Rob Scott's story. We're going to be joined by Rob today, and his story is absolutely incredible. He's gone from literally the bottom, the absolute bottom, the most bottom of bottoms that any of us could ever imagine having, to becoming an incredible success. And Rob's learned a heck of a lot on his journey from the very bottom to now the top. And I hope that by the end of today's interview with Rob, you'll realize that you have no problems. And Rob and I are going to be talking about mindset. We're going to be talking about the lessons that he learned on the way up to the top and the little mind hacks that he discovered that helped pull him out from a very dark place. You're going to really enjoy today's call with Rob Scott. Hey folks, welcome to Freedom Fastlane. Today I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Rob Scott. Rob, thanks for hanging out with us.
Oh, you're very welcome, man. I'm glad to be here.
Rob, I usually like to intro with a little bit of bragging on my guests or doing a little bit of bio, but I don't think I can do near the justice that you can in telling your story. I would like to kick things off with you giving us an overview of your story because it's absolutely ridiculously awesome.
Thank you, man, and thank you also for outsourcing all that work right on to me. I want to deeply thank you for that. No, I think what it is, if I had to do a quick overview, I'm somebody who just kind of really had a rough start of things. I went through a lot of abuse as a little guy. I don't want to start off incredibly morbidly here, but it led to addiction at like a really, really young age. It led to me not having the kind of emotional and mental tools to feel safe and to grow really close bonds and to have trust. And so to feel better, which a lot of us do, right? I found tools that help me feel better. But those led to lots of trouble. Those led to institutions and jails. And I ended up homeless through a lot of my 20s, living in my car and then living literally on the streets. Then I sort of got it together, and I hope what we get to go through today in this talk was I mastered a little bit of how to change what's going on in my own brain. And what that looked like for me was I ended up going and getting a job as a temp in a big corporation. And very, very quickly, I had to stay a temp for a while because I had a lot of court cases to deal with and just stuff to get my life kind of back on track. And then once I could actually get a full-time job, I sort of skipped entry level. I went very, very quickly into management. I rose up and I ended up becoming the youngest vice president in this, company in Philadelphia where I'm from. And, there was no higher to rise there. And then I had this real desire to sort of leave the corporate world and start my own thing. And I didn't even know what that was. I started a podcast years and years ago, kind of when they first came out. And I was just talking about conscious evolution and some of these mind tricks that we're going to talk about today. And people all over the world started asking me for coaching. So, Japan, Ireland, Australia, all over the United States. And I started to become kind of interested in doing one-to-many because I really want to help people wake up, right? So along that path, I ended up getting a bunch of sort of rock star clients, people that were high up, people that were doing massive stuff in changing policy at the national level in government. I've worked on with people who were going to give congressional testimony more than 4 times. And when I say that, there's a 5th one coming up soon. Major whistleblowers, internet rock stars. Eben Pagan's been a client, and he's a good friend. And Scott Rewick, who's a huge media buyer and is the backbone of a lot of other big internet marketers that some of your following might know about. And that's been so incredible. And now more and more what I'm doing is creating products and programs that can help people do these shortcuts that lead to not only deep fulfillment but massive success out in the world, and sort of master both the art of happiness and fulfillment and success. Because if you have one without the other, it's just not quite as sweet a treat.
We'll get to the mind tricks here in a second, but first of all, what? You went from homeless to to Congress. I'm really curious about that period of your life, in your 20s, being literally on the streets. Because my guess is that during that time, you probably learned a lot of interesting life lessons that we, as safe and really addicted to safety as a society, are. We don't get those same lessons.
Yeah, you're exposing a little bit of what's kind of at this is and what might have been a little bit different about me was probably because I hadn't been safe as a young guy, that became kind of an advantage to, well, I can risk this now, right? Because how bad could it be compared to that? So a lot of people that go through a lot of pain and stuff end up with what's turned out for me to be a little bit of an advantage when it's time to go be courageous or get up on stage or do something like that. I don't have the overwhelming fears, but I used to, right? Like I used to be paralyzed by public speaking and all that stuff. But as far as I'm happy to share as deeply as you want, when I was in that space, it was literally like I had access to a certain way that I saw the world working, and society didn't agree with me. And so my homelessness was a combination of massive addiction and dysfunction because of that, right? Sort of, and addiction's interesting because it's both, chemical, and it can sort of get your brain out of balance chemically, right? Like not the right amount of serotonin, not the right amount of dopamine, all that. It can be looked at very physically like that. But it's also an inability to have pleasure from normal things. Right. So, and for a lot of us, that might not be heroin and crack cocaine, but it might be TV, or it might be sugar, or it might be coffee. And so not being able to feel happy in the moment creates all this kind of like a treadmill of time of like, I'm not there yet. I'm not rich enough yet. I'm not happy enough yet. I'm not whatever enough yet. And the worse that now is, the worse that your present experience is, kind of the worse your addiction is, in a sense. And so we all look for strategies to get past that, right? So I'm not trying to stay in the theoretical. For me, that looked like just a deep shame and a deep misery. I had been really badly sexually abused as a little guy, physically and emotionally abused, and just not safe, right? Not comfortable, not happy for lots of years of my young life. And so to deal with how uncomfortable that made me, how full of sort of shame and upset and fear, I wanted to feel better, right? So I started to drink and smoke and try drugs at an obscenely young age, and that became kind of the platform that, like, where all the healthy lessons that I should have been learning, they were getting stacked on top of this really bad base of just imbalance and lack of happiness, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, totally. I mean, for me, I guess my addiction was work when I was younger. It was, I didn't feel good. I couldn't enjoy normal life because I was always thinking about work. I didn't know I was addicted to work. I would not have described it as that, but it was always on my mind, and I couldn't enjoy regular things unless that part of my life was going well. And there was the sense of, I'm not there yet. I'm not successful enough yet. And I mean, that's all an illusion that we make up in our minds.
Yeah, and there's useful parts of that too, because we do want to track across. It's actually a difference between states and stages. And before I go there, I almost want to say that story again. And where I first heard it was from a friend and mentor of mine named Mark Goffney, where that idea that addiction is the inability to have pleasure from normal things, right? And so the opposite of that is kind of like the Zen master. The Zen master takes, incredible pleasure from just breathing and just walking. And that's less and less, a lot of what I want to do is sort of redefine enlightenment. That is a lot less than just some magical spiritual state that he's found, and more an ability to, eat a piece of an orange and just slowly let that flavor unfold in your mouth. Right. And the ability to do that, or the desire to want to do that, is a real awakening for some people. And I don't want to state that that's what we all have to do. Right. We also have to succeed and work toward things and sort of move forward in that way. But if we don't have that ability to be sort of sensual in the moment, with the moment, then we're not really that connected. And, it's a tough place to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And Rob, there's people out there that have similar upbringings to you. They were abused or they were broke or they were physically and emotionally abused.
Right.
And they don't grow into the person that you are. If you look at Rob Scott today, he is happy. He's passionate about life. He's in love. He's in love with his business. He's changing the world. He's impacting millions of people. And then there's people that have the same upbringing or similar struggles, and they're depressed, they're angry, they're resentful, they're nasty. What's the difference between somebody who takes an upbringing that we'd interpret as being horrific and either getting bitter or going on and changing the world? Where was the split?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for calling that out. I'm constantly trying to grow in my ability to receive and, not sort of shake those off and say, oh, well, that was it. It's incredibly special what I've been able to do in the context of my own life, and also how I've been able to help other people. And just to point it out, I've had multiple friends of mine commit suicide around me. I've literally been in gunfights, and the amount of danger and dysfunction I've left people that I cared about in insane asylums, and they have that continual story of, well, I'm depressed, or I'm mentally damaged, or, and they don't ever get out of it. And the difference is what I call, my company name is Fundamental Shift. And so, what I'm standing for is this ability for human beings to actually back up. And I have some stories to explain this in detail of how to do it. But basically backing up the frame of our awareness onto our own lenses so that we see how we make meaning, so that we see how we're telling our own story to ourselves, because the power of what we can do is all in what we believe about ourselves in the moment. So, if I walk into a situation thinking I'm not good enough, this isn't going to work out, I'm going to lose, or this girl isn't going to like me, or I'm not going to get this business deal, like Henry Ford said, chances are if that's what you think, you're right, because you'll end up making yourself right. Your subconscious is built that way. And so you'll self-sabotage, you'll do all these things. Well, I saw very early that I had a lot to do with even deluding myself at times into, well, you know what, I can do that, right? My corporate rise was so based on me committing into things I had no idea if I was going to be able to do, but just believing that I would be able to step up, that I had the ability to figure it out and do it. And I mean huge, massive, taking over whole departments that had 6 people before and doing massive feats in 30 days to, not have this big contract come against the company, and living at this place and almost staying up 24 hours a day to code and to build a piece of software that we could sell legally, when some problem had come in and a bunch of people were fired, and, I came in to save the day. And I made these big jumps because I sort of self-deluded that I could do it, right? So I'm not arguing for delusion, but I am saying that if you're going to go get in a fight with 5 guys, you're going to probably do better if you believe like you can win, and so the ability to manage your own story, your own self-talk, and have that level of awareness, have a level of self-awareness. That's what I teach. These are the tools that I work with clients and what my products are all about. It's sort of like, how can you find your own limits, actually start to discuss with yourself and debate them so that you disprove them, and then what would be the really effective new frame that you would like to implant in yourself. And it has a lot to do with doing that with your subconscious and really accepting it in your brain so it becomes your natural state. And that's the only way to massively change, right? Most of us are in some type of, almost like a Groundhog's Day of, oh, I'm almost there, one day I'll get there, or one day this will happen, right? And it's if we get honest about it, it's kind of, I don't know if I can curse here, but it's a little bit of BS, right? We're lying to ourselves in some sense. And so at what point do you really investigate that and see what stories you're telling yourself and why you're staying safe, why you're staying in that comfortable zone instead of, which is really long-term, pretty uncomfortable, right? And what does it take to tell yourself a new story so that you can break out of that? And it's so much more than just positive affirmations, although they're kind of in the right family. But there's a lot of deeper stuff that can be immediate and fast and create massive change in people, in the moment.
All right, Rob, I want you to address somebody, because there's somebody listening right now who's probably driving in their car. Their name's Alex, I think. And Alex is probably listening, and he or she is saying, Rob, you have no idea how hard I'm working, and I'm not getting the results that I want. And I've been trying this, I've been committed to this for 5 years, and I'm not getting the results that I want. Don't tell me that I just need to tell myself a different story, and I need to come up with some sort of false illusion that I can make it, so that will give me the results that I want. I'd like for you to speak directly to that person and the advice that you would give them. You've advised people at an extremely high level on exactly what we're talking about. Somebody who's trying to get there, who's been struggling and beating their head against the wall, not getting the results that they want. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, so I love that you challenged me on that. I think it's great. And it's funny, I think this is the first time that I've actually come out and said that it's a delusion that we're trying to do, right? It's actually mastering that so much more of what we're in is delusion, and a lot of it is set to hurt us, right? So it becomes a mastery of the fact that almost everything that we're telling ourselves is delusion of one sort or another, and that's a much deeper concept. Right. But like all the stuff that we believe about ourselves is editable, right? And if we talk about this, and if I say that nothing else matters than mindset, right? It's a grand statement, and of course other things matter, but let's really think about it. And by that I mean your beliefs about yourself, your limits, your limiting beliefs, your self-sabotage, the money ceiling that you might have, the belief about what you deserve and what car you should drive and all that stuff. Nothing else matters, because you can have all the connections. You can have all the skills, you can have all the knowledge, you can have the PhD, you can have all that stuff. But if you're set to self-sabotage, if you're set at a certain level, then your subconscious mind is going to make that a reality. And your conscious mind is going to be going, what is going on? Like, I must be unlucky. Or, I don't know why that guy got it, but not me. And so there's a whole lot more happening in your subconscious. So for Alex driving, right, what I would tell you is that there's limits that you can't see, because we didn't choose our story. We didn't choose our mindsets, right? They came to us through our own socialization. And, when a girl turns you down in middle school, you make a rule about what's safe or not, and you either expand or start to shut down because of that. And so we're making up all these rules about what it means to stay safe and stay effective and stay, okay in the world. And those rules we don't even see because they're true to us, right? Like, my beliefs are true to me. Right? We talk about them like they're beliefs, but when I'm walking around it, they're my own set of lenses. Yeah. So I want to share a story. This is a really interesting story. And the first time I heard this metaphor was from a guy named Cameron Huff, who's a friend of mine. And he was talking about it to describe the Myers-Briggs personality type. Okay. But it goes, to me, I think it goes deeper than that. So to anybody who has worn glasses, or who has looked through a telescope, or who has, a microscope, whatever, all those tools use lenses. And so we need to define what a lens is for. A lens is built to literally alter what you see, okay? And it can make it closer, it can make it farther away, it can make it fuzzy, it can make it really clear, but lenses literally alter the view of what you see. But here's the important part about a lens. It is built to not be seen itself. All right. It's built like, if there's a scratch on a glass, on your glasses, or there's rain and raindrops, all of a sudden the lens doesn't work as effectively. You're supposed to look through it without your conscious attention being on it. And it changes everything, right? If you're wearing rose-colored glasses, but you're not aware that you're wearing them, you would walk around like the world is rose-colored. Right? It's just that you don't have access to what it looks like without that lens. And so all of our thoughts, all of our opinions, all of our beliefs about what our parents told us, what we learned through, friends in school, what money means, what are rich people mean or loving, are they giving or are they selfish? All those things end up being these lenses that are back behind our own awareness. And they're doing a phenomenal job as lenses. They alter the landscape for us inside our head. And so what we look at, I like to think about as, the frame of your attention in any one moment. And so, one of the ways to change your state, and I know you're familiar with Tony Robbins and all that stuff, would be to change the frame of your attention, right? So if you're looking at like, I'm a loser, well, just go watch a movie or just change your focus, right? Focus on something else. But the fundamental shift that I'm trying to share with the world is to bring your focus and back it up to investigate your own lenses, right? To see and challenge what you think is fact about yourself and about the world.
To become aware of the lenses that you currently have.
To become aware of your lenses. And there's actually 3 steps, right? What we're really trying to do is to become the meaning maker, because everything in the world, literally everything, comes down to the meaning that you make out of it. And I have lots of neat analogies and stories, and I don't know what kind of time we have, but there's a phenomenal idea that we are bred to be believers. We are bred to believe. And one of the reasons that I could illustrate that is, imagine, go back 100,000 years with me, right? And I'm a hunter. We're both hunters, and we've got some, kill over our shoulder, and we're trying to bring it back to the tribe, right? And we're going down this one, skinny trail, and on the left there's this tall grass, and we hear this rustle in the grass, and we think, well, that could be 2 things, right? That might just be the wind, or it could be a hungry tiger, right? And if we look at that, there's 2 ways to be wrong there, okay, in that situation. One way to be wrong is, it's wind, but we think it's a tiger, so we decide to go the long way, okay? Now, I was wrong. I go, I think that's a tiger, but it's really only wind. It's an error. There's a cost. I have to go the long way. Maybe the food goes bad, whatever. But chances are I get back to the tribe. The other way to be wrong is to think it was wind and continue on, but it was actually a tiger that eats you, right? Now, both of those have costs, but one of the costs is so much greater, right? We actually lose our life. And if we lose our life, we lose more than just our life. The tribe loses our genes. We don't, have any more kids. We don't forward our genes. But they also lose our memes. They lose our thinking. And they lose maybe the courage we had or the thought we had, right? So you and I are the product of hundreds of thousands of years of evolution of the people that decided to stay safe, right? That's why this safety mechanism in our subconscious is so incredibly strong. But what do? We come back, and not only does our genetic makeup make it back to the tribe, but also our stories. I heard a tiger, right? Remember, for that person, it was only wind, but I heard a tiger. Whenever you hear a rustle, it's a tiger. So not only are we teaching it, but we're genetically disposed to be in this meaning making. And so it's incredibly important, the meaning that we make. And survival does matter a lot. And the set on fear impulse that is so big in our psyche helps us survive. But it's, we're surviving at an incredible rate. The world didn't have 1 billion people on it until the year 1804. Wow. Right? And now we're at 7 billion plus. So we've 7 times ourselves in about 200 years. Survival is no longer the challenge, but leading hugely fulfilled lives and happy lives where we're not only, able to succeed and do all this other stuff that we think we want, but that we actually master the meaning making inside. And to do that, you have to back up our frame of awareness onto our own lenses and onto our own meaning making, because the whole game is how we make meaning, not just in staying safe, but in, if I look down the hallway at my boss and he looks at me funny or she looks at me funny, if I think that meant that I'm fired or that they don't like me, right, then a lot of us end up going into a panic or anxiety or depression about it, and we end up performing weird at work, and it literally affects our life, the meaning that we made out of that look. But if instead I go, maybe there was just something in their eye, right, then I act totally differently. And so mastering the meaning, mastering how we sort of do that, and there's 3 steps I'll take you through. That's the crucial game, right? That's the whole deal. And it leads to success, it leads to fulfillment, it's the whole deal.
So, Rob, my first question for that is, if we're built to survive, but now, we don't have, not as many people are attacked by tigers anymore. We don't hear as many rustles in the woods anymore.
Right.
Are we just screwed? I mean, does that mean that we actually are built to sabotage our own happiness? And I think we're going to go into what we can do about that next. But I mean, is that the state of things? We're just wired to not be happy?
Well, it is, and it is because our subconscious, and this is provable through, current neuroscience understanding and all this different stuff. Our subconscious mind is built for survival. It is not built for happiness. It doesn't care at all about happiness. And your subconscious mind is wildly more powerful than your conscious mind, and just in the amount of data that it can process and in what it does behaviorally. There are studies where they're starting to show that if you decide to go open a door, that your muscles physically fire, right? The neurons that fire your arm are actually in action before you've consciously made the decision to open the door. Like by milliseconds, you're behind what your physical body's actually doing. And so a gross or large example of that would be, you look up and there's a speeding truck coming your way. Your body jumps out of the way. You don't have to go like, is that thing coming? How fast is that coming? And, do I have time to stay here or should I move? You don't do that kind of processing in those motions. When it comes to safety, your subconscious is keeping you safe all the time. Just like, touch a hot stove and you don't have to think like, oh, that's really hot. All of a sudden your hand just jerks, maybe so big that you smack your partner in the face, like, like you just do this huge getaway because we're built to survive, right? And survival has everything to do with safety. And what is the most powerful emotion to keep us safe? It's actually fear, right? It's actually like, be afraid of that thing over there, etc. So that's just a huge motivational factor for our subconscious. And how that shows today, you say there's not a lot of tigers. I live in a city, and you could imagine a woman walking home and having a gaggle of people of a different descent, strong basketball players or whatever walking down the other way. What does she maybe do, right? She might walk right past them, but instead she decides, I'm going to go right. I'm going to go around this situation. And not only that, what does that mean? She actually stayed safe. Maybe she went the long way, but she did stay safe. She might have walked 100 times past that gaggle of guys, and it wouldn't have been a deal. But there's no chance of it being a deal if she goes the long way. But what happens? She gets home, and what does she say? Saw a big group of those hoodlums again, and thank God I went this way. And she's teaching her offspring whatever her belief structure is about why she was afraid about it, right?
That's hugely insightful as to why we're threatened by change, why we're threatened by people that don't look like us, why we want to keep things the same. That's hugely insightful if we look at it from we're wired to stay safe. Change can be a threat. It's the tiger.
Yeah. Change is always potentially dangerous. And so one of the ways I like to say this, and I've helped people drop, 100 pounds in rapid time. And to do that, you have to actually change on like an identity level, because your subconscious is trying to keep two things alive. Here's what's really interesting. It wants to keep your body alive, which I think we illustrated pretty well. But what they're finding is it also wants to keep your identity alive. And so when I talked about delusion earlier, if you have current delusions, it's looking to prove those right for you so that you don't seem crazy to yourself. It's actually, if you think you're a loser at a party, it's going to go and point out how you're a loser at a party. It's going to make that more readily available, because we don't focus on everything that's available as far as information in a room. We have a reticular activation center that's actually choosing, what am I processing? What's here important to make meaning out of? And so if I go into I'm a loser, it's gonna constantly perpetuate that. So for a heavy person, and they wake up going, I don't want to eat the cake. I'm not going to eat the cake today. I'm disgusted with myself. Today is finally the day. And then they watch their hand as they don't want to, and maybe they're even crying. They watch the cake go into their face, by lunchtime, right? Because the subconscious says, that whole losing weight thing, I don't even know about that. That's different. That's not you. We woke up this morning. We win, that's success, and so we're going to do whatever we did yesterday to a great degree. And so there's two ways to change after that. You can try and force habits, like habitual change, which is, it works. I've written a book called The Habit Cure, right? It's a little, mini ebook that's just free and helpful, right? Habit Cure talks about what does it take to create new habits in your life? How long does it take? Why do we do it? What's the motivational structure? And that is, it's certainly a facet of creating change in your life. Right? But it's the willful act. It takes all your will to do it. The other way is to go in and through talking directly or convincing your subconscious mind that another option for you is safe, that it's okay to be this other person, you can actually change your identity, because that fat woman doesn't change until she starts to see herself as, let's say, an athlete. right? So if she comes to me, I say to her, let's do these mental things. We're going to get you to see this stuff. We're going to expose the BS that you have now, and we're going to implant in, I am an athlete. Why? Because an athlete, chocolate cake is no longer the issue. You may or may not have chocolate cake, but you work out. It has all these other behaviors kind of in that identity, right? So changing on an identity level is the only way to get your subconscious mind to have a new pattern for what's safe and okay to do. Right? For new entrepreneurs, a lot of times making sales calls is really, really scary. And they think, well, I need another course to become an entrepreneur. I'm not that yet. Right?
I'm laughing because that's so true. And we've all done it. Like, I need to get more information before I do anything about this. Yeah.
Because it's not safe yet. Right? And what do? You look at other entrepreneurs and you're like, well, they have advantages, or they have history, or they're just lucky, or they're different than me, right? They do different stuff, and that's the reality. Those other people do different things. They think
you
different
said
thoughts.
You said do.
And I'm so glad I did. Nice. But essentially, they do different things, right? They actually do. And so for us to do them, it has to feel safe and okay to do them, and it won't until our identity kind of takes on, oh, wait, I'm an entrepreneur now. And if I can code that for somebody and actually get them to, I'm an entrepreneur now, sales calls happen because entrepreneurs make sales calls, right? So that no longer has the stigma or the challenge or the problem for that. So, getting that subconscious mind that's only interested in safety to have it pattern in another safe reality so that it's not different. Right? It has to do with visualizations and sort of seeing it and patterning it in. Doing that allows you the ability to say, oh, I can totally do this new thing. It's totally fine.
Okay, Rob, well then, how do we get there? I mean, we understand that we're wired to stay safe, not to be happy. And that's a common misconception among people. We often think that we're wired to be happy, so there's something wrong with us if we're not happy. That's not the case. We're wired to stay safe, and most of us are pretty darn safe. And it's interesting, those who are often safest are the least happy because their brain gets satisfied with being safe. And so now the gremlins in the brain start to go, okay, what else can we do to make us safer? And we freak out, we get stressed, we get depressed, and that's what happens. Yeah. So how do we start to make that shift? I understand that we don't start to make real change until we have that identity change, or we change the lens that we're seeing the world. How do we get there? What do you do when you're coaching people to start seeing themselves or the world differently in order to produce a certain result?
Yeah. So, there's 3 steps to this. And the first one is seeing the limits, right? And many of us don't see them because they are our identity. Some people would argue for these. They would say, no, but I'm just not good at sales. Or, no, I just can't play football. Or, what, girls just don't like me. Or I'm not attractive. And to them, that's a truth, right? And they would just argue for that. So first off is seeing the limit. And, to quote Tony Robbins, again, one of his great ideas is that awareness itself is curative. Right? So, one of his stories is if we're in a big conference room and there's chairs all over the place, but all of a sudden the lights go out completely. Right? And I know I have to get to the exit over there, but there's no light coming in from outside. It's literally pitch black. I might be able to navigate the room, but it would be really slow, painful. I'd probably hit my leg on some chairs trying to get over to the exit and all that. But halfway across, if the lights just turn on, now I can see all the limits. I can see all the chairs in my way, right? And I can navigate them really, really well. Okay? So seeing the limits, becoming aware of what's going on takes away some of the truth of them, right? Just by becoming aware of them. So turning on the lights and becoming aware is the first step. And there's process to do this, right? But what if there's a pile of chairs in the door, just seeing them doesn't free you up to get through? What if your limits are so big? The next step is you need to challenge them and ultimately learn how to change them, right? Like change them and move the chairs, right, in the analogy. So step 1 is seeing them, becoming aware. Step 2 is challenging them. One great sort of free process for that, Byron Katie out in the world has her 4 questions and a turnaround to just challenge, is it true? Is it true that you're ugly? Is it true that you're bad at sales? Does it have to be true, right? Like just challenging them and kind of looking at them, right? So this is things people can do at home right after this. The third way is to then you kind of have this void. You have this sort of challenged identity level belief about how things are. The next level is to choose a new identity and pattern it in. And I have a 6-step process to doing that. These are things. But one of the ways is just to start to normalize so that your subconscious feels comfortable with it. What is this new identity? What does a new entrepreneur have to do? What does somebody who loses weight, how do they have to do it? Visualizing it and normalizing it and patterning in that new identity to your subconscious is what really changes the game.
In other words, making what seems like a big deal not such a big deal to the subconscious mind.
Yeah, and you were talking about how we're safe and that kind of leaves us unhappy. A lot of times it's more complex than that, because in the example of the woman who's 100 pounds overweight, she's actually not safe, right? What her subconscious is wired for safety or thinks is safe, it's really only that it got us to here, but oftentimes it can be really, really dangerous in the long term. So much so, some of these limiting beliefs lead people to suicide, right? So they're not necessarily safe. They're interpreted as safe because they work to get us here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you just kind of warped my mind with that. I had never thought of it like that. Is there a way that we can use that to our advantage, where we can say, this part of me is actually not safe because, and then fill in the blank. I am not safe because I'm in this thing that doesn't make me happy. I'm not safe because I believe that people don't like me, or I believe that I'm rejected. I'm not safe because I'm 100 pounds overweight. Is there a way we can actually channel that into the change that we want?
Absolutely. So, some of this is, if you talk about like meditation, right? What meditation is trying to do, and you can sit on a couch or a seat, whatever, for 10 years working at that. Over time, and it's phenomenal. It's a great practice. I love meditation, all that. I have no problem with it. But the reason it takes so long is that there's no structure to what's really happening there, and it's like you kind of have to wait for it so that you have this big kind of epiphany that like, wait, oh wow, my thoughts really aren't me, right? That I have all these crazy thoughts, and that I can detach from them and see them. I can back up the frame of my awareness so much that I can objectify my thinking. And look at it, right? I can objectify my experience in a way and see that I'm actually the watcher. Yeah. I don't have to be any of these identities, right? So, our limits get patterned to protect us, and they work wonderfully in the moment, but they get miswired, and things that we think keep us safe don't actually keep us safe at all, right? And absolutely, to your point, that one of the big ways to get around that is to start a dialogue with yourself to say, wow, this doesn't work at all, and I'm doing it every day, but it's really going to lead to heart disease and this whole thing, right? Actually visualizing out what does your current behavior lead you to. It can be one of the most motivating things in the world. And I don't mean to be all over the place here. I want to keep this tight and concise, but I think there's a big misconception about what motivates human beings, okay? We feel as though, and it's sort of in our main human story, that we're endlessly motivated away from pain and toward pleasure, right? Almost nobody would disagree with that. We would all say, sure, yeah, that makes sense. I definitely move away from pain and toward pleasure. I want to add a wrinkle to that. It's actually that we move away from pain and toward familiarity, okay? Our subconscious mind is moving away from pain and toward familiarity. Our conscious mind wants to move toward pleasure, right? And we use pleasure all the time to manage our feelings and to do all that stuff. We have the sugar, we watch the TV, we use drugs, we drink, and they work phenomenally to change your state, right? But what our subconscious is doing is moving away from pain and toward familiarity as best it can, because familiarity is safe. Change is dangerous, right? So here's an example to kind of illustrate that. You take battered wives, and everybody wonders endlessly, why in the world don't battered wives leave? Right? Well, they don't leave because there's a part in them that the idea of leaving and having to pay their own way and like out there is so scary by comparison. Now, staying isn't pleasurable, right? They're not staying and they're not moving toward pleasure at all. In fact, they're staying in pain a little bit, but it's familiar pain. He hasn't killed me yet. I don't think he's going to kill me. I might have to take a shot on the eye occasionally. I hope not. I'll work a little bit to maybe get out of that. But you know what? It's better to be with him and have food on the table than it is to leave, because I don't even know what that looks like. Yeah. And so because it's unfamiliar, it's even more dangerous than staying in danger. And we stay, right? A huge percentage of battered women stay. And we're all doing that to some degree. So when you say, we're trying to stay safe. There is a bit of a comfort zone, but often our comfort zone is incredibly uncomfortable, but it's familiar. Right?
Right.
So we could sit in this sort of self-hatred, and I don't think you're necessarily one of these guys, but I've had a lot of experience around people who are, miserable, and they're self-deluding. I talked a lot about delusion at the beginning of this. We delude ourselves so hugely in the story that, oh, this is going to change, this is going to happen. But check your journal. You were probably writing very similar things 3 years ago to what you're writing now about what your goals are and who you want to be and all.
Scary.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we're stuck in this kind of illusion of this treadmill of time that's really not going anywhere until we actually really address how we're looking at the world, what our lenses are, and then seeing, right, like what are the better lenses to have. And when you change those, you change in an instant. And all of a sudden it's you have this powerful new opportunity to really be somebody new. And so for me, I've gone from, cancer survivor, I've been addict, I've been homeless guy, I've been, really, really fit, athlete, I've been runner guy. I'm constantly kind of evolving the identity that I have, which doesn't mean it's not me, right? Of course I'm there, but like, what is the thing that I want to master? Like, what is that guy who's really awesome at jiu-jitsu? Like, what does he think? How does he wake up? When he comes into it, what's his mindset, right? So mindset is a lot deeper concept than what most people think. And, it's phenomenal to go kind of implant important mindsets for whatever goal you want to achieve. But it's way more important to see how you make the meaning and what your lenses are and what your mindset is on a much deeper level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I'm chuckling to myself while you're talking because you bring up the jiu-jitsu master. We a friend of the show, Jesse Elder, a mutual friend of ours, is a jiu-jitsu master. And when we had him on the show, we were talking about what's the difference between someone who's homeless and feels defeated and somebody who's a millionaire. And then I said, well, I doubt anyone who's listening has been homeless before. And, well, then here Rob and I are.
Right.
Talking about how we used to be homeless.
Yeah.
Well, now, Rob, with the 5 minutes or so that we have left, I think the best use of our time is to go in and look at this first step of becoming aware of what our lenses are. Because this was huge for me, becoming aware of how I perceive the world. And, now that I've kind of become aware of that and disassociated myself from my conscious thoughts and realizing that I'm not my thoughts, and my thoughts are just, a conversation going on in my brain. It's not who I am. Yeah, I now can actually... I often see other people who are still lost in thought and think, wow, you're so asleep.
Yeah.
So my guess is that there was a big shift for you that happened when you were homeless and a drug addict that allowed you to disassociate from those thoughts and that identity of who you were. And I would like to kind of focus the last few minutes of our time on how people can become aware of thoughts that they don't even know that they have. I mean, I have thoughts I don't know that I have. I have a lot that I've become aware of, but we all have things that we're not even aware that we have certain beliefs. How do we become aware of them so that we can become free of them?
Yeah, let me just tell a quick story. I'm glad that you framed the 5 minutes so that I know kind of what, how tight to keep this. I've had a lot of big eye-opening experiences in my life that I could rattle off that, this was huge, that was huge. Some of them are, maybe pretty horrifying and all that. This one was funny. I was in jail in Philadelphia years and years ago, and there's a big, bad dude right down the way, and he is just ripping on the guy that, the cop who's, manning the show right there, but is sitting there, and he's ripping on him like so creatively and so fun. And now I need to frame this. I was at the worst part of my life, right? Like nothing was working out. I should have been just absolutely petrified. I was about to go into a gen pop kind of area with like really bad dudes, and everything was looking bad for Rob, right? Like nothing was working out, and yet this guy is just tearing up, might as well think of them as like, your mama jokes kind of stuff. Just like tearing up this guy who's, the man, right? The cop outside the bars. And I'm in my own little cell at the time listening, and I just start hilariously cracking up. Like I start losing it. And I felt so much joy from this guy who's just a thick, badass, huge dude who, is like, and you blah, 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 right? And he's talking stuff, and it was so funny. And so I'm at this lowest point, for many people, right? Like doesn't get much worse. And I'm filled with all this joy, and something popped in me and said, wow, like it has nothing to do with my surroundings, right? My joy, my happiness, my connection has nothing to do, right? I have access to that whenever I want to have access to that. And so there's a self-authoring that becomes really important in this. Most of us are walking around thinking we're victims of our circumstance or victims of other people or whatever. There's a personal responsibility that pours in that I'm going to manage more than anything my own state. After that, my own results to the best degree that I can. And we don't manage our own results, right? Like if I'm trying to sell something, somebody else needs to make a decision to buy it. But I do, I can put as many marketing messages out as I can or whatever. The portion of that I control, take responsibility for that. But at the core of it, take responsibility for your mindset and your own state, right? Like make meaning that makes you happy, and make meaning that makes you capable, and make meaning that motivates you to take action. So become the meaning maker, right? Master your mindset. And so how do you do that? And this is really fast. The best way is to have a session with yourself where you write out on a piece of paper any negative thought that you've been aware of or could be aware of that you think about yourself. Any envious thought, because honestly, you're not going to ever be rich. I will talk to people and I'll say, do you love money? And they're like, oh, I love money. I love money. I adore it. And then I'll say, well, what do you think about rich people? And they go, well, rich people are selfish asses, right? Like I hate how they're raping the world and corporate this and corporate that. You're never going to be rich if you're putting it down, right? You're never going. Your subconscious will not let you become that which you resent. It just won't. And so you can think that you love money, but if you're hating people who have money, your subconscious isn't going to let you become that, right? So you have to become aware of, like, what are you envious of? Who are you jealous of? What do you hate? And when you're writing these down, write the things that you even think are true about yourself. There's that level. And then write the ones that you know are not true. Okay? Wow. So, if I were writing one, I might write one like, I sometimes have the thought people don't like me, or I'm unlovable, or something like that. Now, if a friend were to ask me about that, I'd be like, that's ridiculous. Of course people like me. I've got this many Facebook friends. I've got tons of people. I enjoy people, right? Like, there's no conscious part of me that really thinks that that's a problem, but it doesn't mean it doesn't pop up as, like, bad software in the system sometimes, right?
Right.
So writing out exactly what you're saying and being, like, as honest as you can be about it with yourself, right? And having a safe place to do that with a coach or with someone else or in one of my programs is a good way to do it. But doing it yourself just to see, like, oh my, how dare I say these things to myself? Like, oh my gosh, right? And then the next thing is sort of reframing them, saying what would be the more powerful way to talk to yourself here, challenging them, saying that's not really true. It doesn't have to be true. I'm going to choose that it's not true. Right? Taking ownership and power in it. And then deciding what's a new thing to think instead. Right?
Beautiful. Beautiful, Rob. Yeah. I'm having aha moments as you're talking. So this is fantastic.
Awesome.
Rob, I would like for you to take a minute or two and talk about, we've covered a lot today. And I think we've impacted people in just the 45 minutes or so that we've been talking, but you could dedicate a lifetime to this stuff. And you kind of are doing that. So where could people connect with you? Where can they find out more, and where can they go deeper?
Sure thing. First off, thank you for this platform, and thank you for honestly being my friend. Like, I just love you as a person. I think you're amazing. Thanks. I wish you the most success with this thing, and thanks for having me on, because I really, really do care about helping people that are suffering, even the ones that aren't aware of how much they're suffering, but if they check, they sort of go, wow, there's a lot more here to do. People can sign up for a free coaching course that I have and tons of other resources at robscott.com. And more specifically for what we've been talking about, I have a new program called The Core that really goes in and helps you repattern all this stuff. And they can get that at just robscott.com/core. And if they go there, they'll see, there's tons of good information about what it is and how it works and all that stuff.
Beautiful. Well, Rob, thank you so much for influencing all of us here at Freedom Fastlane. Keep on changing the world, buddy.
Thanks so much, man. It's great to be here. Have a good one.
Man, if you don't feel inspired after hearing Rob Scott's story, I don't know what will. To go from the absolute bottom to more success than most of us would ever hope for, that's somebody that I want to learn from. So thanks again to Rob Scott for hanging out with us here at Freedom Fastlane. If you felt inspired or empowered by listening to today's call with Rob Scott, would you do me a favor? Would you go to our page on iTunes, just search for Freedom Fastlane on iTunes, and leave a quick 5-star review? It really helps us spread our message of freedom and help people live extraordinary lives. If you leave a nice review on iTunes, it would really mean a lot to me if you would do that. I also want to let you know, we have a Facebook page. It's really interactive. You can find us on Facebook at Freedom Fastlane, facebook.com/Freedom Fastlane, and I'd love to connect with you there. Send me a message and let me know you're a fan of the show. Thanks for listening to Freedom Fastlane, and I will chat with you soon.